Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Macintosh bias, Apple bias, you don't even know.
That was a little too fast.
Was it?
You gave people.
Now I got to turn you off. I wish there was a way to make that easier. Maybe somebody could write us a shortcut so we could do this switching.
Yeah, Discord.
Okay.
It would be nice if we could switch those inputs quicker. More.
Yeah.
You have to go down a couple levels.
Automation.
Yeah.
Hey, can you guys still hear me in Discord? Just make sure I set my output correctly. That's still right.
Oh, you know what I'm not getting is Hindenburg.
Oh, that's because I forgot to do Hindenburg. Oh, come on. All right, we'll go over to this window if you insist. Hindenburg. Okay, try it now. 1-800, try it now.
That's not.
No.
Looking...
I did. I asked. I told it to do Hindenburg. Try that again. Try it again.
Well, I don't really do anything. It's...
No, you have to erase the here. How do I get to? I don't know how to make it show. Show it.
Oh, well, this is it right here. This is what I'm seeing. Is your entire desktop, which is...
That's frozen. Go back to that. That's frozen.
Yep.
You have to fix that on your end. I can't fix that. I can't not be frozen. I can't. You have to reconnect it.
There is no reconnect on this side. I'm just pointing to your local touch bar.
So I can't fix that because I'm not frozen. There's nothing. I mean, I could quit NDI and start it again if you want, but
we did this successfully, didn't we?
And you reconnected on your side.
No, there's no. The reconnection is the Mimo Live calls. But NDI is not.
I'm not sending it through Mimo Live, a Mimo call. I'm sending it through the application NDI scan converter.
Right. So what I'm trying to explain is Mimo call has reconnection, but NDI does not. NDI is just pointing to an IP address.
Okay.
So
what would you like me to do?
There's not. I don't know.
I can quit NDI scan converter. That's all I can do. I can quit it and I can open it up again.
Let me just...
I was asking if you wanted me to do it. No, don't change anything else. Don't change anything else. We'll just try this. And now I'm telling it Hindenburg. Take a look again.
Okay, now there's nothing. I don't see any device. Hold on. Wait, here we go. There we go. So I think quitting and restarting did it.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. All right, I am going to get started here. Let's see, we got Brett and Kevin and Jill and Rose snuck in, and Rick and Sandy and Steve, and I can tell Frank's in there. We got TitanBot, not sure who's coming in on the side channel there. And let's see, we got Kevin and Sandy. We got Wing Women, we got Wingmen. We're ready to go. All right, Steve, I am going to mute you, and we're going to start recording. Too slow. Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Apple bias. Today is Sunday, November 10th, 2019, and this is show number 757. This week's Chit Chat Across the Pond is really, really special. It's an interview with Ken Case, the CEO of Omni Group. Now, we don't actually talk much about his current work, about the company Omni Group, but rather we start back with how he went to college when he was only 13 years old at the University of Washington. He is an amazing, amazing guy. He takes us on the fascinating journey of technology that ended up leading him to work for Steve Jobs' next computer company, and how that changed his view of what computing could actually be. It's a wonderful story filled with super geeky details, including talking about something called BitNet, which I'd never heard of and Bart had never heard of. Anyway, it was really, really cool and geeky. And he actually talked about how he helped write the precursor to IRC, or Internet Relay Chat. You can listen in your podcatcher of choice in the Chit Chat Across the Pond light feed, or of course you can listen over at podfeet.com. I really think you're going to love it. Alrighty. Pledge phone number. Oh, that 1-800 buy it now. That was from Kyle, when he was a kid, had an assignment. I don't even remember what the assignment was supposed to be, but he and his friend Chris created made a little video where they built a catapult and they were trying to sell it, and it was 1-800 buy it now, 1-800 buy it now. They didn't even get an A in it. I really think they should have.
Chapter mark?
I think I will.
Good job.
I'm not going to do images anymore, because guess what happens when you when I do chapter marks?
What?
You the first chapter is the Hindenburg logo.
Oh.
Yeah. So oh, that worked. That's interesting. All right. Next, I'm going to read a little short thing here. Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Okay, try that again. That should be a little quieter. I don't think I pulled that down. Muting. Oh, Steve muted himself. Well, this week, I had the pleasure of being a guest again on the Daily Tech News Show. Tom, Sarah, Roger, and I talked about the day's tech news, of course, followed by the main discussion, which was a topic I chose, which was to talk about whether we really need to have a new shiny operating system every single year. We didn't pick on macOS, Windows, Android, or iOS, but they all got their fair share of comments about problems with this rapid pace of upgrades. I have to give Ray Robertson a shout out. This was inspired by the conversation he and I had on Chit Chat Across the Pond 2 weeks ago. Anyway, there's a link in the show notes to go listen over at dailytechnewsshow.com. And I've embedded the video in a separate blog post on podfeed.com, so you can't possibly miss it. Go check it out. All right. Back here. All right. I am going to play a recording.
I don't see a chapter mark.
I haven't done it yet.
Aha.
And there won't be any data yet. There won't be any, what do you call? There won't be a blog post. But let me chapter mark. Let's see. Andrew Chen from Landing Zone. I should have a link to Landing Zone. Let me do a little intro. I don't think I introduced this very much. Well, you guys know that I'm crazy about docs. I've right. Let me do a little quick record here. Meeting Steve. I have the second interview that I did at MacTech, so let's give a listen. I think I should get a Landing Zone URL. You can't possibly miss it. Go check it out. I have the second interview that I did at MacTech, so let's give a listen. Well, you guys know that I'm crazy about docks. I've reviewed, I think, 4 Thunderbolt 3 docks so far. I love me a good hub. So I had to stop by the Landing Zone to talk to Andrew Chen about their offerings that they have here at MacTech. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing great, having a lot of fun. So what do you guys do?
Well, we make docking stations for MacBook computers. We have full feature docking stations. We have Thunderbolt hubs, and we have portable docks as well.
Oh, great. So this is all my stuff here. I want all of this.
Well, hopefully we'll find something of interest for you.
All right. So why don't you walk me through what your offerings are here?
So our simplest offering is sort of a portable docking station, a portable hub more like. It connects to any sort of MacBook with 2 Type-C ports on the left side. So you just slide that in there and you have access to HDMI, power pass-through, USB ports, and SD card slots.
So it's I'm looking at it right now. So is that power delivery then?
Yeah, power delivery port. You have to connect the MacBook's power adapter in there. And it
right.
Just passes through power straight to the computer.
So you guys use both of the USB-C ports?
Yes.
Okay. And so how many USB-C ports do I have when I'm done? Off of yours?
You would have 1 USB-C and 2 USB-As.
Okay.
Yeah. So
actually, no. It looks like you still got two.
One for power, and then you have one USB-C, two USB-As, an additional USB-C, but that's just for power delivery, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then HDMI. All right. Oh,
HDMI,
and an SD card slot.
as well. Yes.
So exactly. I was really surprised that one of the speakers from OWC was talking about the value of getting feedback was that everybody told him that nobody uses the SD card slot on their hubs, and so they're going to take it out. And I was like, I used mine today. You know, I am recording right now on a Zoom H4n Pro that has an SD card. I have a camera that has an SD card. You know, you got your GoPro micro SD. You know, you gotta have SD.
Well, one of the reasons why we built the SD was we use SDs all the time in my camera and basically in for.
I'm going to stop for a second. Has anybody typed anything since Frank wrote pledge phone number? I can't hear you, Steve.
In Discord, there's been a lot.
Yeah.
Your Discord must have failed.
Well, no, I'm thinking it's an AirPlay problem. I'm going to disconnect it and see what happens. Let me see what Discord looks like when I've got it on my Mac. Where is it? Oh, that's nifty. Oh. Let's mess everything up here. Where did Discord go? Come on. Oh, it's in full screen in another space. Yeah, I got nothing. Oh, wait. No, he said volumes.
Yeah, you're up to speed now.
Okay. That's annoying. That's not very good if it does that, right?
What happened with Discord? It just
Sidecar
stopped scrolling?
it just, I don't know, the app just died over in Sidecar.
Oh, so you're running Discord through Sidecar on your iPad?
Right. Well, no, Sidecar runs on the Mac, and then that lets me treat it as a second monitor. And so let me put it back over there and see if it'll behave. I tried to go over there to scroll to paste in a URL for you because you probably didn't have one. This is the guy I'm talking to. So that's kind of a Discord or a Sidecar fail.
I didn't see that in the post.
I said you didn't have that. That's why I just gave it to you. There's no real link. It's kind of boring because there's just an audio recording. So I thought it'd be more fun. Actually. No, that's fine the way it is. All right, I am going to skip to the end of this and tease you guys with that. It came out pretty good, though. The audio is pretty nice, don't you think, Steve?
Yeah, I think it turned out well.
All right. Next up is going to be... Dorothy sure noticed. All right. So let me do a chapter mark. What is that? That's weird. I see show my screen for a second.
Okay.
So you see the vertical line with the yellow dot at the top. That's a chapter mark. What are those two little blue things? I don't know what those... Cue points. What's a cue point? I got two of them. I never saw cue points before.
Are they just markers?
In the menus. I guess. I don't know.
Well, it seems to have gone away. I don't see them now.
I deleted them.
Okay. Maybe they're just markers, in case you want to put a little reference. Like I hiccup there, I got to go back and edit it, or...
I guess, but there's no menu choice for creating them.
How'd you do it?
I don't know. All right. A lot of breathing, Steve. You've been watching too much of the morning show?
The morning show. Jennifer Aniston.
You guys watch that? All right. The first episode, Jennifer Aniston breathes really heavily through the whole thing. All right. Too cold. There we go.
Did you do your chapter mark?
I did.
Good.
You should be able to see it.
Let's see.
All right, muting Steve.
Speaking with you.
Okay. Okay, should. Oh, this is a pain. Actually, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to make a blank recording here. Okay, one of the things I don't like about Hindenburg is there's no real easy way to duck. If you watch what I'm doing here, I have to have some recording one place to be able to duck the other thing. So I had to create some blank. That didn't work. I have to. So annoying. This is not a normal way to have to duck. I have to have some space up there so that I can grab this and I can do that. And then I don't know what I can do with this. I think I can grab that down like that, but I didn't really want it to go. I want it to go way down. Bring that way down. I don't really want that there.
Maybe you'd have to do that because it's got to duck under another track.
Right. So you can't I can't. It's hard to explain, but
you don't get the little controls until
points again. Sorry, what?
You don't get the little control points until you create that other track.
Yeah, I have to create that thing in order to have it duck under. What are those things? So I'll have to. Maybe they added an enhancement. They must have. Okay, that's quite enough. I can talk over it at least. All right, now I can start. Jeez. Okay, muting. Steve's muted. Gotta get a deep breath here.
It was nice speaking with you.
I've done something very drastic under the hood on podfeet.com, and you haven't even noticed. In a way, that's a very good thing. I actually changed hosting companies for podfeet.com from Bluehost to DigitalOcean. Before we get into some nuts and bolts about that, let's talk about the problem to be solved, shall we? A few months ago, I ran into a problem on my website where I ran out of disk space. Bart and I fussed around with a few things like how many backups to store and such, and essentially we kind of kicked the can down the road a bit. Well, that bit me just last week. In order to serve up the glory that is podfeet.com, I have to have two things: a domain name that I rent from one company and a physical server, which I rent from another company. As you can imagine, the cost of the server is related to whether I share it with anyone else. I don't, how much disk space and RAM I ask for, and a few other things like whether I have a static IP address. I do. The first option we considered was simply adding more disk space to my current server at Bluehost. This sounds super easy, and there's even a little button that allows you to add another 30 gigabytes, which would double my storage. Yeah, believe it or not, podfeet.com lives in 30 gigabytes. Adding that extra 30 gigabytes would be $10 more than I was paying, but I love all of you as much as I love my own children, so it was worth it to me. Here's the problem. While Bluehost does let you have another 30 gigabytes, that storage is on a separate disk. So in order to actually use that space, I would have to go back and change links and things to put some content on one volume and another content on another volume, and I was so not going to deal with a mess like that. My first option was to work with the Bluehost team to migrate my server to a new one so they could start it up with enough disk space to be comfy for okay. I don't like that whole thing. Start there. First option. It's really kind of a second option by that time. Since simply adding disk space wasn't going to work, my next option was to work with the Bluehost team to migrate my server to a new one so they could start it with enough disk space to be comfy for a long time. A few years back, I upgraded my server to a virtual private server. They call that VPS. This sped things up quite a bit because I wasn't sharing resources with anyone, as I mentioned earlier, and it also gave me a measure of protection against malware crawling over from other people's servers. The other benefit was that Bluehost would answer my calls pretty much on the first ring, so I didn't have to wait in line with the great unwashed over on shared hosting plans. I was immediately directed to the VPS support team for my technical support. But when I called them this year to talk about how to move my server, the quote unquote technical support person, and I put those quotes around that on purpose, he said, all you have to do is click the button to add another 30 gigabytes for another $10 per gigabyte. I'm sorry, $10 for that 30 gigabytes. Anyway, I explained the problem with that. He was unaware of how it actually worked. And that's when he said he'd escalate my call to the VPS people so that they could email me in 24 to 48 hours with how it should work. It's like, wait a minute, email? And I'd have to wait days just to talk to someone about how to move my server? I hung up and called back, expecting someone smarter, but I think I got someone even less informed. Again, this quote unquote technical support person said I could push the button to add more disk. We chatted for a while and we were doing a couple of things, and he said he needed my login password to check something out. Probably shouldn't have given it to him now that I think about it, but don't worry, I changed it later. My password for my website was created from Bart's amazing service, xkpasswd.net. So it's about 328 characters long. It's got numbers, letters, special characters, and a goat in it. As I tried to read it back to this joker, he got confused when I said tilde. He asked me, what's tilde? That was one of the characters in the special characters in my password. I assumed, it had to be just a bad cell connection. He'd have to know what tilde was if he was a technical support person. And I said, the character to the left of the one on your keyboard above the backtick. And he said, and I'm quoting here, oh, you mean the squiggly thing? Now, I'm not saying everyone should know what the tilde is, and you might not even know what it is yourself. But a Linux tech support person at a hosting company, absolutely, positively, beyond any shadow of a doubt, would have many times a day type the tilde characters because it means home directory in Linux. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. At this point, I hung up and I decided to investigate the second option, moving to a new hosting company. Before I tell you about that, though, the VPS people did write back to me 2 days later, and guess what they said? They told me to push the button to add a second 30 gigabyte disk. The only good news is I was offered a survey from that email, and I may just have explained in that survey about why this answer was what pushed me to change hosting companies. Bart and I started looking at options for a new host. I was interested in Linode and DigitalOcean. Since Bart has an affiliate relationship with DigitalOcean, we went down that path. I'm going to spoil part of the story, but using Bart's referral code, I got a $50 credit towards my hosting. After I burn through that $50 and I spend a real $50 of my own money, then Bart gets $50. That's crazy pants. I've never heard of an affiliate code doing that much good. All right, so now pretend you don't know that this moving to DigitalOcean thing worked. We took a look at their cost for hosting what they call a droplet. Get this, their droplet with 3 gigabytes of memory, I only had 2 on Bluehost, and 60 gigabytes of storage, double what I had. It was only $15 a month when I'd been paying $28 a month over at Bluehost. This was too good to be true. Of course, it was too good to be true. Duh. It turns out I was getting a service called WHM/cPanel over on Bluehost, and it was not included on DigitalOcean. Ever since I was a wee tiny young podcaster, I've had access to cPanel, and I never appreciated that it was a really cool thing of value. I took it for granted. It wasn't until Bart and I were comparing web hosting services that I learned how much I was actually relying on it. I also didn't understand how cPanel and WHM, which is short for Web Host Manager, were related. cPanel is a company and it builds 2 products, cPanel and WHM. All right, confusing right out of the gate. Not surprised I didn't understand. So you got a company named cPanel, but these 2 services, cPanel and WHM. These 2 services actually provide completely different functions. cPanel allows a user to administer their website through a graphical user interface instead of the command line. WHM allows a system admin to manage the server themselves. For example, among many other things with cPanel, I can do stuff like use a web-based SFTP client to upload files. I can look at my database with MySQL, and I can run backups. Now, WHM is for more heavy lifting stuff like upgrading the operating system and the supporting tools that power my website, like the scripting language PHP and the web server software Apache. I use WHM to automatically renew my security certificate, so you get that adorable little lock symbol next to HTTPS in the URL bar for podfeet.com. Now, I'd been using WHM for a while because when I went to my own server on VPS, Bart and I decided that, I think Bart decided he was going to teach me how to be a sysadmin. We'll see how that's working out. But that's why I've been seeing WHM, is because he's been helping me learn it. Anyway, I enjoyed learning the value of WHM and cPanel because we discovered that I did have to pay for it, but now I knew why I really wanted to pay for it. The cost of cPanel and WHM doubles the cost of my hosting on podfeet.com from $15 to $30. But now I realize I was really dependent on those tools. Adding that $15 a month isn't bad at all. Now remember, I was paying $28 a month before to Bluehost. Now I'm only paying $30 a month and I'm getting double the storage and an extra gigabyte of RAM. I am a happy camper to pay that extra $2. Now, moving a website is a terrifying operation, at least to me. I haven't done this since I moved from GoDaddy about 356 years ago. Bart explained that we can do this with our lovely new friend, WHM. At this point in the story, I have an IP address, a server has been provisioned, and it has an operating system, which was CentOS, which is the free version of Red Hat Linux. There's no Podfeet stuff anywhere near this new server. We trotted into the WHM interface on my shiny new droplet, and in WHM, we found the tool called CP Move. This application tells my old server over on Bluehost to generate a full backup, zip it up, and then send it over to my DigitalOcean server, and the new server will expand it. There's some switches here and there on what to do about the changing IP address, but it was really quite straightforward. But there was a huge problem. Remember the problem to be solved way back at the beginning of the story? I was out of disk space on my old server. I had literally megabytes of space left. I'll spare you the days and days of messing around that we did to try to make some space, up to and including where I removed a folder called NosillaCast, had a bunch of old stuff from 2015 and before, and I thought, okay, it's safe to pull that down just to make some space. I'll put it back later. I figured it didn't have anything else important in it. Turned out it had the RSS feed. That means that the NosillaCast podcast itself wasn't working for a few hours until I figured that out. Well, eventually, we did determine that the full backup over on my old site would require twice the space of the backup, and the backup was 3.8 gigabytes plus an extra gigabyte for fun. So I didn't have anywhere near, what is that, like 9 gigabytes of extra space. So guess what I had to do to fix it? I had to push the darn button to buy 30 gigabytes of disk. I couldn't believe it. Well, as soon as I did that, though, I could point the backup to that new drive and it had oodles of room to store those files. And it only cost me $4.77 because it was prorated and it worked perfectly. Once we had a real backup, it was positively magical how WHM was able to scoop it up, unpack it, change the IP address all over the place, and make it work over on my new droplet. Now, another fun, nerdy thing to tell you about is how the DNS records play into this. Remember, I said I have to have two things to make Podfeet to go: a physical server where the files are stored, and I have to have the domain name podfeet.com registered. The DNS records are what allow you to type podfeet.com, and then the servers across the world know to send you to 157.245.168.5, where my site actually lives now. Well, believe it or not, I still do the domain registration over at GoDaddy, and it's been really great. Gone are the large-chested, scantily clad women on the front page. There are actual pictures of real-looking people doing real-looking jobs, and I'm really happy about that. Bart was pretty surprised when he saw it come up on my screen, and it wasn't revolting. Well, Bart did some really tricky things in my DNS settings that I don't 100% understand. Don't tell him I didn't follow this. In DNS, there's a thing called an A record, and that was simply set to the @ symbol, and that pointed to the original IP address. He had me create a second A record and had it set to www2, and he pointed that one to my new IP address. Like I said, I don't completely understand the lingo here, but the result was that for a while you could reach Podfeet on Bluehost at www.podfeet.com, and you could also see a duplicate of it over on DigitalOcean at www2.podfeet.com. And they were identical because one was a backup of the other. Once we verified that the new Podfeet on DigitalOcean was fully functional, we changed the A record to point to the new IP address on DigitalOcean. Now there is one and only one Podfeet. Other than the backup problem that I had because I had no place to store it, the process was spectacularly easy. Well, after this adventure, I did have a smidge of tidying up to do. Here's a really weird thing we found. I could securely log into my new site as root using what's called a secure shell or an SSH client. Root login is an all powerful thing with all privileges. However, I couldn't log in using my user account. I couldn't securely FTP either, as my FTP client kept saying, your authentication isn't valid. I had to get Bart involved again, and we discovered something really interesting and good about DigitalOcean. These guys simply do not allow you to log in with a username and password, which is what I was trying to do. You have to have RSA secure keys to log in. Speaking of things that I vaguely understand, but I would have a hard time explaining, RSA keys are a much more secure way of logging in than a username and password. Now, this whole concept threw us for a long time, but once we realized the password was never going to let me in, we used the keys I had for my server, and Bob's your uncle. I was good to go. Another thing I had to clean up was the podcast feeds. I use an awesome tool called Feeder from Reinvented Software to create the little text files that make all the glory that is the Podfeed podcast come into your devices. I push a button, and then the next episode gets published. Feeder is actually securely FTPing that little file up from my Mac to the podfeed.com server. I happily pushed my little publish button on Feeder for programming by stealth last week, but when I checked in my podcatcher, there was no episode to be found. That's when I remembered that I had to go change the credentials for the feed file over to the new server. I was trepidatious because what if Steve Harris, the developer of Feeder, wasn't clever and forward thinking enough to allow me to use RSA keys to authenticate to the new server? Shouldn't have worried because, of course, he thought of that. I fixed the feeds and we were back in business. Well, I lied about one thing in this whole story. I said that I moved my server and you didn't even notice. Well, that's true for all but two of you. Dorothy noticed something amiss when she couldn't upload the Programming by Stealth index to podfeed.com. Her fabulous index is wee tiny little text files, but she just happened to try to push up those kilobytes while I had wedged the entire server trying to make those backups. We also did have to do a fair amount of work, and it took Bart and me a while to try to find a way for her to be able to push her files up to podfeed.com because it gets very confusing, and I know the end condition, but this whole RSA key thing wasn't going to work for her to be able to push things up to podfeed.com. I was able to create in my droplet this little, actually, I think I used, did I use cPanel? Now I don't even remember. I used something to create a web disk for her. I think it was in WHM. This web disk, she can just put things on this web disk, and it's actually a little spot on my server that she's allowed to put stuff, and now all of that's working. Well, the second person who noticed when this happened, which is actually now 2 weeks ago, was Chris. He tried to get to the NosillaCast and discovered that the last and most recent episode was missing. He decided to finally join our Slack for the first time over at podfeed.com/Slack and post a question about it. Luckily, I happened to be playing on my Mac right when he wrote it, and that's when I realized I had fixed the Chit Chat Across the Pond Light feed, the Chit Chat Across the Pond feed, the Programming by Stealth feed, but I had not actually fixed the NosillaCast feed. While I was in there, I fixed the Taming the Terminal feed because I know I'm going to forget it between now and when Bart and I finally record a new episode of Taming the Terminal. That will happen, by the way. So, with the exception of Dorothy and Chris, nobody seems to have noticed that I moved podfeed.com. The bottom line is that I learned a lot. Podfeed.com has lots of room to grow. It's much faster now, too. It may be because it's a fresh install of the operating system, because we essentially did a nuke and pave, or it may be because it's a new, more efficient version of the programming language PHP, or maybe DigitalOcean gave me better resources, or maybe that extra gigabyte of RAM is helping out. Anyway, it cost me an entire $2 a month more, plus that $4.77 for the few days extra of that 30 gigabyte disk on Bluehost. But you know what, you guys? You're worth it. You unmuted before I was done, Steve. I could hear you moving your microphone.
Oh, it's okay.
Oh, is it?
It doesn't come through.
I can hear it. And were you sending text messages to the family or something?
Nyla.
Yeah, I forgot to turn off notifications on my Mac and on my watch and phone, and everything was dinging for me.
Everything's lighting up.
Did I miss anything? Oh, let's see, 108 messages since I looked last. Okay, let me read. I'll be right back.
All right. So there was a lot of talk about temperature, the weather all over the U.S.
Ah.
Sandy still doesn't know what snow looks like.
You've never been in the snow, Sandy?
Well, I'm sure she has. She's in Vegas. It's kind of hard to remember.
Did you complain about our temperature?
I did. The 40-degree swing we had the other day.
Yeah, that was fun. We're walking down to go for our walk, and I'm like, the side of my face is getting like uncomfortably hot as we're walking down in the sun. And it was 75 degrees. And by the time we were done with our run, it was 84. It was like 10 in the morning. I didn't get any sympathy from people on the East Coast, though.
No. People liked your use of the word trepidatious, and then that spawned other words. Rose's favorite is discombobulated. That's a good word.
That is a good one.
There was another one. Disingenuous. Frank likes disingenuous.
Well, I'm probably not going to do my fourth article. We'll see how long this goes.
Look at Jill's shot.
That one. Oh, nice, Jill.
The kitties. It looks like one of them is about to pick up a hammer.
I was answering what you were saying, though, Steve.
Oh, okay. Keep going.
I use highfalutin in the article. Oh, no. It's now I'm going to use it. Never mind. Here we go. Let me do it now. This would be a good word. Okay, muting Steve. You know how in fancy pants movies they show highfalutin people being patrons of the arts? They pay for artists and musicians to make the world a more beautiful place. Maybe you're not highfalutin, but you do want to help make the world a better place. Instead of being a patron of the arts, how about becoming a patron of podcasts? You can support the NosillaCast and all of the other fine shows we produce over here by joining Patreon. It's really simple. You go to podfeet.com/Patreon. You create a login and then pledge a weekly or monthly dollar amount you think you'd like to contribute. Think of it value for value. How much value do you get out of every show? A lot of people contribute just $1 a week, and that's fantastic. But some really special people carve out even more. It's relatively painless, and it really helps to keep the show going. Now, listen to me. If you can't afford it, do not push that button. Seriously, don't. I'll come after you. I don't want to hear about it. But if you have the spare money and you'd like to be highfalutin, check out Patreon as a way to make that happen. Make what happen? What was I talking about at the end? It's like that didn't flow. Hang on.
Pledge break took a turn there.
Yeah, let me see. Seriously, don't. I'll come after you. I don't want to hear about it. I'm going to cut that out. But if you do have the money to spare and you'd like to be highfalutin, I would like you to push the button to check out Patreon and see if you'd like to contribute to the Podfeet podcasts. That was a little better. The cat on the left is about to adjourn the meeting. All right. It's going to be super nerdy. God, my chair keeps rolling backwards. We got those hard things. Anybody know how to make your chair not roll backwards on one of those those plastic things you put under your rolling chair? I can't stay up close enough to see. If I get back this far, I'm out of focus. Take the wheels off. Oh my God, that's awesome, Sammy. That's the kind of thing my son Kyle would say. Oh, I haven't had that kind of a laugh in a long time. Well, then it'd be hard to move the chair at all. Then I don't need the hard rolly thing. What are you doing, Tesla?
Checking things out.
Oh, ear flap. Don't interrupt me, Tesla. I'm doing a chapter mark.
Oh, we got to check it out. Let's see if it worked.
Well, it's not going to work. Watch this. Oh, you're not going to see it. I'm going to do it. It's very odd that this works, but it does. There. I found a workaround. It's not as efficient as one would hope. And and I wrote to the Hindenburg guys saying, why don't you just leave the focus there like any normal app? And they said they might. They said they might. They said, never thought about it, but you're right. That doesn't work like a normal app. They're not Apple developers. It's like a port, sort of.
From Windows?
Well, it's a Windows. I think they use a development platform that works for both. So it's not exactly standard. So it's Clarify. You can kind of tell. Oh, you guys, want to make sure you know, if you have the App Store version of Clarify, you can send a screenshot of it in the App Store, and then the Clarify people will give you a key code to be able to use the 64-bit non-App Store version. Alistair was all sad. Yeah, you can take a screenshot of it in the Mac App Store showing that you own it.
Sounds like that could be gamed, but
well, whatever. They trust you.
Yeah.
It's because Alistair was all sad. He was like, "Oh no, I bought it in the Mac App Store. That means I can't get it." And then they said, "No, you can have it." Herman Miller. I've heard of Herman Miller chairs. All right, I should keep recording here. Muting you, dear.
Mm-hmm.
I like being able to mute Steve. Wish I had that in real life. Okay, here we go. No, this time.
What?
This time. Shut up.
What?
Stop it! As you know, Bart Busschots and I do a podcast together called Programming by Stealth, which is a subset of the Chit Chat Across the Pond podcast. I know, I should have made it its own show from the beginning. Having it exist in kind of two ways is really confusing, blah, 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 blah. Well, too late. Okay, that's how we did it. Well, before Programming by Stealth, Bart and I did the Taming the Terminal series, which technically, as I mentioned, is not finished yet. And yes, it was also a subset of Chit Chat Across the Pond. Well, I love these shows and I enjoy the heck out of learning from Bart. There's another fun layer of confusion that we also enjoy. The podcast is created by me and it's hosted through podfeed.com. But the show notes, which are actually incredibly detailed tutorials and written painstakingly by Bart, are over on bartbusschots.ie. When I post the podcast, I create a blog post on Podfeet that provides a link to Bart's site, as well as a downloadable MP3 player and an embedded audio player. This audio player is actually the subject of this article, but that's not going to become obvious for a little bit yet. Over on Bart's site, where he has his glorious tutorials, he provides the embedded audio player as well. Of course, if you subscribe to the podcast, these audio players don't matter, but lots of people like the player and they like the downloadable MP3. If I forget to put that in or I mess up the link, I always get emails. Anyway, as long as we both keep cross-linking to each other, it's all good, no matter how you get the show. I mentioned that we both have an embedded audio player on our websites. In the old days of WordPress for websites, you had to use what's called a shortcode to create this audio player. You use square brackets, and you had to specify inside the brackets what kind of file you were embedding, like was it audio or video, the codec for it, was it MP3 or an M4A, or even a video file. But a while back, the world became carefree, and all we had to do was type in the URL for the location of the file, and WordPress would automatically create a lovely little player on our sites and interpret the type of file and everything. You didn't have to do anything. Now, if you wanted to get fancy pants, you could use your CSS, also known as cascading style sheets, to define things like the size of the player, the color of the play bar, the margins around it, and mess with all those little CSS settings that make listener Helma's heart go pitter-pat. Life was good. Until one day, I went to Bart's website. Instead of the lovely audio player he used to have, there was a plain black bar. No play button, no progress bar, nothing. Just a black rectangle. The audio player continued to look normal over on podfeet.com. Well, I alerted Bart immediately. He studied the problem and he was unable to find a solution. As happens sometimes, we kind of procrastinated on fixing it. Well, that's right around the time that I got to know the lovely Helma, and she was helping me with some styling on my site using CSS. I asked her if she would take a look at Bart's site with me to see if we could crack the code on why his audio player was misbehaving. She and I spent several hours trying various things, and we were never able to find a solution. Bart's solution was, he said, I'll just put in a hard link to the MP3 file. So the way that works is when you click on it, it gives you a new page with a big black empty screen, but a player in the middle of it. It's better than nothing. You can open two windows at the same time, keep the thing playing. It's kind of junky, but it worked. Bart went back and fixed a lot of the posts so that you get the link to the MP3s. But last week, I discovered that the first 50 episodes had never been changed, so the dreaded black bars were still there on 50 episodes. I mentioned it, and the two of us tried to scrape back through our memory of who was last left holding the ball on who was going to fix it. He was sure I'd promised that Helma and I were going to go back and fix it. I had no memory of that, but I decided it was time to work on this again. There had to be a solution. Well, as an engineer, I was formally trained on how to do controlled experiments. The most important thing when doing experiments is to change one thing at a time and document the results as you go along. And that's really the only way you know for sure whether you fix the problem or whether you know how you fix the problem. This is a pretty simple concept, but we all often fall back on instinct instead of following the process. I knew that this particular problem was going to be a tough one to crack, so I decided to be very deliberate in my work and follow the process. I opened up my favorite place to keep detailed notes, especially those of a technical nature, the application Keep It from Reinvented Software. I figured much of the content I'd be putting into this note would end up being code, so I chose the monospace font Courier. This would allow me to line things up correctly, be more readable, and just feel kind of robust. I'd like to say I was brilliant in my path to start, but I'll admit that I stumbled across a clue right off the bat that turned out to be completely useless, even though it looked so promising. I was noodling the problem with Dorothy on the elliptical, as we are wont to do, and I tried to show her the black bars by navigating to bartb.ie on my iPhone. But instead of black bars, there was a perfectly functioning audio player. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? I was seeing the problem on my Mac. When I got home, I tested his site on my iPad Pro. Now, an important thing to know is with iPad OS 13, the iPad is now using desktop Safari, the same Safari you have on your Mac. Guess what? It had black bars. So my Mac using Safari had black bars as well, but both Chrome and Firefox did not have black bars. So it was only desktop Safari that had the problem. I should have probably started right there, but I didn't. My first test was to copy Bart's links over to podfeet.com on a test page and see if the audio player worked on my site, just the way he had typed it. And it did. Then I copied my links over to his website, and the player was replaced with black bars. So it's not anything about the way we're typing in the link that's causing the problem. It certainly didn't look like it, but you got to start there. I decided to replicate a few experiments that Helma and I had done before to ensure I knew our starting point. On bartb.ie, Bart had the URL for the download wrapped in what's called a div. The div tag simply defines a division or section in an HTML document, and it allows you to add styling to that section. He had added the class podcast, which is then referenced in his cascading style sheets or CSS, and that styles everything to do with that class. Now, in this case, Bart can change the look and feel of everything with that class all at once. So the class podcast is defined as a rounded rectangle with a blue dashed border and a pale yellow background. He's planning on revamping his website someday soon. And when he does, if that styling doesn't go with his new color palette, he can change all of these little sections throughout his entire website by changing just the podcast class in his CSS. That's the power of CSS. Now, Helma taught me a very cool technique to use in diagnosing problems like this. In a web browser, if you go into the developer tools, and it's different in every different browser, so I'm not going to go into how to open that, but you can enable something called the web inspector. In Safari, where I prefer to work, this reveals a little target that you can drag around on screen, and you can point at specific things on screen, and it'll tell you what element in the code that you're viewing. If you click on that area that you're interested in, down below the normal website page in the inspector, you can scroll through how those elements were created. So I was able to point at the player and find out what the styling was for the podcast class that was on that div. With me so far? Anyway, the web inspector showed me the color he had chosen, the margins he defined, the border, the background, and font choices that he'd made. Now, here's the crazy cool thing you can do. In this web inspector, each of these little options that Bart had set in his CSS gets a little blue checkbox next to it in the inspector. That means you can actually turn off any of these options, leaving the styling to whatever the parent styling was. So if the styling was what was actually causing these black bars, this should have been able to fix it. Now, don't worry. By unchecking these little boxes in the web inspector, I'm not actually changing Bart's website at all. This non-destructive method lets me see what it would look like with those styles removed, but doesn't actually change his website for anybody else. It's actually really fun. Sadly, though, disabling each one of these style choices one at a time and recording the results did not change whether there were black bars instead of a player. Well, next I tried something that was a bit less of a precise scalpel and a little more in the sledgehammer category. I swapped out his theme. Now, before you panic, let me explain what that means. A WordPress website is many things. In a database, it has all of the data. That is, the text of the blog post and links to the media elements. I wasn't touching his data at all. The theme is a text file that controls things like whether there's a sidebar, what's in the menu bar at the top, and the main styling of the website. You can override the look and feel with specific styling using CSS, like we've been discussing, but the theme kind of sets the stage. In modern WordPress implementations, the CSS and the theme files are kept separate. But Bart's theme is from so far back, it's all in that one theme file. So swapping out the theme, I am removing any CSS he has applied to his site. I mean, 100% of it. The cool thing about how all this works is you can switch the themes with a simple click of a button and your content all stays in place. It's just the look and feel of the site changes completely. I needed to choose a theme to swap in, and I noticed that Bart had a copy of his super secret new theme he's been working on, so I switched to that. Boom, the audio players all came back. So now we know the theme is at fault. It was right at this moment last week when I realized, little pea-brain said, this is exactly where we wound up last time. We would have to wait for Bart to carve out the time to design his new theme before we could get this fixed. I was kind of depressed. I switched his theme back to the real one. However, in spite of this concrete evidence that further investigation was complete folly, this time I pressed on in my investigation. Remember the player worked in Firefox and Chrome and mobile Safari, but it failed in desktop Safari? It was time to dig into this. I ran through all of the following tests in desktop Safari. I tried a new private window. I turned off the one password and Grammarly extensions I had running in Safari. I disabled content blockers. I disabled prevent cross-site tracking, which was kind of scary. And I was still on Mojave, but I had Mac OS Catalina test machine, and I tried it there. Sadly, none of these changes succeeded in getting rid of the dreaded black bars of doom. Trademark Donald Burr. Now it was time to get serious. I installed a new, fresh copy of WordPress on my Mac using the tool MAMP. Now, I've mentioned the ability to do this a few times and even made a video tutorial for it on how to do it on Screencasts Online. Once I had WordPress downloaded on Bart's real website, I was able to figure out that his theme is a modification of a theme called Blue Zinfandel Squared. I downloaded that theme from the developer without any of his modifications, and I installed it inside my local installation of WordPress. I was able to create what I would call kind of the distant cousin of Bart's theme. It looks kind of like it, but not exactly. I didn't have any of the customizations he'd done, and I didn't want to bother him by asking him to download a copy of his real theme for me. He lets me play inside a small sandbox of WordPress, but I don't have privileges to his files. I think that shows his intelligence right there. I need water. By the way, Bart just texted me. It's 6 o'clock at night. What's 6 and 8? 6 and 8 is 14, 12. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Jeez, Bart. He's changing my calendar, and it's coming up on every single device. All right, save. That's a good idea.
Do you need more water?
No, I think I'm doing okay.
All right.
Jeez, Bart.
Security
Bart's
bits.
Yeah, he's moving the calendar, and it's changing on everything.
I just got that.
For the love of Pete. That's the third time. 2 devices. And I have notifications turned off on everything. Jeez. I think it's off. Yeah, I'm in Do Not Disturb on every device. All right. Keep going here. Yeah, I know it's water. It's hard to believe. I did try to suss out how to download his real theme, but I never did figure that out. Using Helma's technique of analyzing the website, though, I was able to find some of his style sheets. Now, I've been referring to the CSS, but sometimes it's many different files all ending in CSS. I recreated 12 CSS files one by one, copying them from his site, the data from those from his site, in hopes of getting the black bars to show their ugly heads locally, but they refused to appear. No matter how much I abused this local installation, I still had a lovely audio player. Now, for those of you who know anything about WordPress, you've been yelling into your devices, but what about the plugins, Allison? Well, you see, I didn't start here because Helma and I had already gone down this path more than a year ago, so I was 100% certain it couldn't be a plugin. Come on, don't laugh at me. You know you've worked off of old memories before and been certain they were valid, no matter what Dr. Gary has taught us about our memories. Plugins, for those not versed in the ways of WordPress, are little programs that extend the capability of your WordPress installation. Let's say you want an automated contact form like the one Sandy put on a new WordPress site. You do that with a plugin. Want to stop spam? You install the Kismet plugin. That one is so essential it actually comes with a fresh install, possibly also a French install of WordPress. To give you an idea of how valuable it is, I just checked, and it is now blocking around 9,000 spam comments per month on podfeet.com. Anyway, it's time to dig into Bart's plugins, no matter what my memory was on this was telling me. Bart had around 20 plugins that were currently active, with a small handful of inactive plugins that I could ignore. The first thing I did was I copied the name of each active plugin into a numbers file. I wanted to make sure I had a record of which ones to turn back on when I was done experimenting with Bart's site. I had to find a way to determine if one of those plugins was causing the problem in the least number of separate tests. I didn't want to do too many tests. I wanted to limit that. Now, the trick to a problem like this is to not turn each one off one at a time and test. If you do it this way, you might get lucky and the first one you turn off is the one that caused the problem, but it could easily take as many as 20 tests to find the culprit. Statistically, the average would be 10 tests. Well, to save a lot of time, here's what you do. You simply cut the problem in half over and over again. With a list of 20 plugins, we can turn off the first 10, and if it fixes the problem, we've immediately eliminated half of the plugins. If it doesn't fix the problem, we can turn off the other half. If a plugin is the problem, we now know it's in the second half. If it's not a plugin that's causing the problem, we've only done 2 tests to eliminate all of the plugins as the problem. Now, if we've got 10 in our test, because we've cut it in half, we can cut it in half again, and we've eliminated 5 in just one fell swoop. After that, turn off 2 or 3, depending on whether you believe in rounding up or down. And the most you'll have to do is, I think, 4 total tests instead of an average of 10 the other way. So the first thing I did was I turned off all the plugins. I really needed to know if a plugin could possibly be at the bottom of the problem. Now remember, we know the theme change fixed it, so this was a real long shot. Well, I turned them all off. Sure enough, the audio player reappeared. Can you imagine my excitement? I ran my cut it in half process, and in just a few tests, I found the culprit. It was a plugin called Subscribe to Comments. Now here's where things continue to be interesting. I use the exact same comment on podfeed.com, and my player still works. So there's some combination of Bart's cascading style sheets, his styling, along with this plugin that caused the player to stop working. So subscribe to comments, by the way, is what gives you the nifty little checkbox next to comments on both of our websites that allows you to be notified if someone else comments on the same post. It's a great way to see if one of us responded to you if you've asked a question. So I learned everything I know about WordPress from Bart, and here's the philosophy he taught me about plugins. First of all, use as few plugins as you possibly can because they're actually vectors for an attack on your site. They are essential, but if you don't really need a plugin, why open up that possible vulnerability? Second, in choosing a new plugin, make sure it's been updated recently. Make sure it's got a high star count. Make sure a lot of people have downloaded it. Steer towards plugins that have been tested for your version of WordPress. That's not always possible right after a new version of WordPress comes out, but you shouldn't be very far behind. Always say yes when your plugins want to be updated. Well, I took a look at the plugin that Bart and I were running. Get this. It had not been updated in 4 years, and it had not been tested on the latest 3 major releases of WordPress. Obviously, this plugin violates pretty much every one of our most important criteria for a good plugin. Here's the problem, though. We're both super diligent about updating plugins when they ask us. But how do you make yourself notice that a plugin has stopped asking to be updated? It's kind of like asking a room full of people, everyone who's not here, raise your hand. Well, the good news is that quite quickly, I was able to find a shiny new plugin called Subscribe to Comments Reloaded. This plugin has over 20,000 downloads. It has 4.5 stars by 133 people. It's been tested as compatible with the current version of WordPress, and it was updated just a week ago. After I installed Subscribe to Comments Reloaded on my WordPress and on his, I discovered two great things about it. One is that it automatically slurped in all of the subscriptions from the old plugin, so you won't lose what you asked for in past posts. The other great thing is that now you can go to any blog post, and if you want to comment, you still can, and you can subscribe to comments, but you can also subscribe without commenting. You can be a lurker. You cannot imagine how proud I was of my little self finally fixing this problem for Bart and for the users. It was a fun adventure that took a couple of years. I finally conquered it. When I do something particularly nerdy and I want a little pat on my pumpkin head, Bart sometimes awards me a gold star. This time, he gave me 5 platinum stars. I am still beaming with happiness about this. You unmuted yourself again, Steve. I can hear the echo of my own voice coming out of your microphone or out of your speakers.
Really? Because I have headphones on.
Well, I could hear it. I got feedback on my own voice.
Huh.
I know 5 platinum stars.
I think you should have received gold press platinum.
I probably should have.
5
should have held out for that.
Bars. Yeah. So Kevin is suggesting maybe a chapter mark would be in order.
Does he want a chapter mark for me to say goodbye?
Yeah. People want to go right to the end of your show.
Oh, did I use any cute words in that part? Slurped.
Slurped. Oh. That was a good one. It was simple. Just, is that 1 or 2 syllables? Slurped. I don't know if they count that as 1 or 2.
Did you know highfalutin is 1 word? I
really?
did, because I looked it up. Yep.
So it's not even hyphenated. Wow.
Remember I said I couldn't use my fingers on the iPad? I can use 2 fingers to scroll, but I can't select anything. I can't select menus. Yeah. All right. Scroll. There we are. All right. Most valuable programmer. Yay. Actually, I did some other stuff, and he said he started calling me a programmer, which is pretty exciting, but he has now declared that I'm a sysadmin.
Ooh, we'll see. For your own site? For your own site?
Well, because I've been doing sysadmin-y kind of stuff.
For his site.
Well, now for his site, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, that wasn't sysadmin. That's a website administrator, really.
Okay, we'll get that.
So trying to figure out my public-private key thing is if I fix this thing, he says I'm a sysadmin.
Pretty soon he's going to put you to work.
Welcome to the club. Oh, Joe, you're a sysadmin. I didn't know that. What flavor? Jill's awesome. She's so our people. We'll get her on a Mac, and the assimilation will be complete. All right, I'm going to mute you. Well, with all of that nerdiness done, I'm going to wind us up for this week. Don't forget to send in your dumb questions. Love me a dumb question. Actually, it would be good if they'd be dumb questions that I can actually answer. Somebody sent one in recently, and I was like, yeah, I don't know the answer to that one. That one's not dumb enough. Anyway, you can send me those dumb questions, comments, and suggestions. You can email me at allison@podfeet.com. Want to follow me on Twitter? @podfeet. Remember, everything good starts with podfeet.com. podfeet.com/Patreon, podfeet.com/Facebook, podfeet.com/Slack. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, head on over to Where Do You Think? podfeet.com/live on Sunday nights and join. I messed it up. And join what? podfeet.com/Slack. Can't believe I messed that up. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, where do you think you go? You go to podfeet.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time and join the friendly and enthusiastic NosillaCastaways. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed. Okay, so this is really funny. When I was on DTNS in the pre-show, we were talking about Tom was talking about something on his site, and I asked him where it was, and he said everything good starts with dtns.com or something. And he said he actually did learn from me, because he's one of those people who would always say, a lot of people do this. They say patreon.com/DTNS.
Right.
Well, why make somebody go away from your website? Why not just have them remember your website / whatever you want them to go to? And that way they're always thinking about your website, not this other service. And the main thing is, one of the reasons I do that is podfeet.com/live. It's moved a bunch of different places, but you don't have to know that, because I redirect you to the right place.
So you're getting suggestions that you get the phone number 1-800-POD-FEET from Kevin.
Really?
that would fit. I wonder what that dials to. We should try it.
PODFEET. That is 7. Oh man, what would we do with it though? I don't want you guys calling it. Because Kevin knows the number. Right? Okay, how'd I do there? Stay subscribed. Dialing questions. All right, Steve, you want to get me that for? Okay, we could make that a Patreon goal.
So how do people know in advance what dumb question is dumb enough for you?
And good luck.
Yeah, that's trial and error.
Actually, see, I'm hearing my own voice right now. I'm hearing an echo.
That's weird. So I don't know. Okay, how about now? Are you hearing your voice?
You have to be quiet. Do I hear me now? Yes, I hear a faint echo coming through the mic.
So that is weird, because I don't think it's coming from my headphones. I could put cans on maybe.
I mean, it could be coming through the door.
That's true.
The door's open. Yep, that's where it is. It's coming through the door.
Oh, from the door to my mic. Your voice to my mic through the door.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's what it is.
Yep. You just saw a Tesla tail? All right. So I didn't have to write that article this afternoon. I was frantic. I forgot. Oh, Tesla wants to come in. Here you go. Hey, dog. Wait, where's Tessa? That's not good. There you are. It's really dark.
Yeah. She needs some light on her.
Tail flap. Ear flap. She's such a good dog. She's very patient.
You're a little low.
Sorry.
There we go.
Let's see. I have 4 chapter marks. That doesn't seem like enough chapter marks. I think I'm missing one.
No. Yep.
Okay, I've got update, break, repeat, landing zone. I moved Pod Feet and you didn't notice, and Geek Adventures. Oh, I guess that's it. 3 main articles. Wow.
So I got chit chat, update. We got DTNS. We got move the Bluehost or to DigitalOcean, and we got the audio player fix.
Well, and you missed landing zone. Landing zone.
Okay, right.
You don't have that, but yeah, that's it. Okay. Why does this look wrong?
What are you looking at? This?
Do you see when you look at update, break, repeat in WordPress? Do you see 3 hashes ahead of it instead of a nice?
I'm sorry. In fixing Bart's audio player?
No, in your. Oh, there it is. That's why I found it. Never mind. I fixed it. You would maybe not notice it. All right, so I'm gonna send that to the blog. Oh, we got to start exporting here. Now that we did a count, Rick's gone.
You did keep people pretty late.
I did. Oh, it's 6:09. I'm sorry. Bye, everybody.
And wait. Next week will next week be the same?
I hope so.
So we're getting back in time.
Yeah, we better come back. Tilde.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, we're going to be down at the gender reveal party for Lindsay's baby. We know we're having 1 grandbaby girl, and we don't know what the second one is yet. We get to find out.
Not from Lindsay. That's from the other daughter-in-law.
Yeah, Lindsay's not having two babies.
She's not having twins.
One gender of which we know and the other one we don't.
And one we don't. That would be weird.
That would be. Well, maybe if you always want to make sure that the twins have separate identity, you have two separate parties. That's weird. Right. All right, guys, we should go. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.